I walked the neighborhoods. I have met with businesses. I've been in homes. I've been in our schools. And in those schools, I've talked to the students. I've talked to the teachers and to the teachers' organizations. I've talked to the parents and the parents' organizations. I meet often with the superintendents. I meet with the president of the university and the president of Original. I meet with the mayors. Very often we have issues that deal with wildlife or with water. I've arranged for meetings with the citizens and with the cities, with the Department of Natural Resources. At the legislature, youth groups come and we host them and try to give them a feel for what the legislature is like. When it comes to public safety issues, the barrier in the canyon, for example, different intersections, lights, turn lanes, those things come up all the time. We try to address the citizens' concerns and make arrangements for citizens to be able to air those grievances or what they would like to have done with UDOT. When Mendon, who for years has not been represented by a representative out of Cache Valley, we had an opportunity to try and have them now be part of Ledge District 5. I worked hard to make sure that they got an opportunity to do that, and that's the way it turned out. During the legislative session, I try and send out a weekly newsletter. And that weekly newsletter contains updates on what's going on, and we also hold public town hall meetings during the session. Believe me, those things make a difference. None of these things make the news, but I believe that they make a difference. It's my job to represent you. It's my job to understand the things that you need to have done to protect the way of life here and to stand up for our values. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. 3 minutes now for statements from Mr. Turley.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the Herald Journal, the Logan City Library, and KUSU for sponsoring this event. If it wasn't for groups like that, we wouldn't have opportunities for people to be able to see who the candidates are that are running for office. I would also like to thank Donna McAleer, who is running for against Rob Bishop for U.S. Congress District 1, for being here as well. Thank you, Donna. The main question today is, who am I and why am I running? As far as why am I running against Curt Webb? Well, I've been paying attention to politics over the last few years, and in my opinion, I don't think that Mr. Webb represents the people and the issues that I care about. An example of what I think he has done, who he represents, is that transparency bill of 2011, where they tried to make the legislature more private and not as open. And a lot of people uproared about that. And then when the governor called a special session to repeal it, he was one of the 3 who still did not vote for it. And so from that point of view, it kind of showed me that, does he really represent the people and what they really want, or does he represent other issues? I don't know. So that's why I got involved in issues like that. So who am I? I'm a guy just like most citizens here. I've been living here in Cache Valley for 25 years, since 1989. I've worked at Utah State University. I've always had to have 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. I understand what it's like to have to deal with medical issues. I was a caretaker for my wife for 15 years before she passed away, and I understand what it's like to struggle with medical bills and be able to have to deal with issues like that throughout your life. I'm a native Utah, and there's one thing that I would like to kind of point out is during political season, there's always issues that are brought up, and I like to call them political panic buttons. And each one of these issues involve so many voters, and there's 2 sides of it. And half those voters are the ones that vote for that issue. And if a candidate's able to get enough of these panic buttons pushed, he can get enough votes to win. But there's one issue that never really comes up during the election cycle, And it's an issue that affects every one of us, every citizen of this state, not just in this valley, that has to do with the state budget. And so all those people that win the election because of the panic buttons are the ones who control the state budget. And in my opinion, special interests have too much control over those candidates to where it's not representing us where we need to. School funding's underfunded, and I guess my time is up.
Thank you, and thank you for observing that. I appreciate that. Now we're getting shorter because we want to get through as many questions as we can. So we'll have 90 seconds for each answer, and then a 30-second rebuttal for each candidate thereafter. And so we'll just be going back and forth. And so I'll direct the first question first to Mr. Turley. And I'd like to open with just an open-ended question. What would be your legislative priorities for the coming session?
Very good question. My first priority would be to try to bring balance to the legislature. This state is so represented by one party that they represent just a small portion, in my opinion, of the state of Utah. That's the extremist of that party. And the majority of the people in the middle and on the left aren't getting represented. So the first issue I'd like to do is bring some balance and be able to work with everybody, not just the far right. I'm worried that this state Republicans have so much control that if they go too much farther to the right, we're going to tip over. But the second issue I'd like to work on is educational funding. When the state touts about being the best managed state for business, but yet ignores the school funding issues, and we're the lowest funding, that doesn't make sense. It sounds like they're putting all their eggs in one basket. So what I'd like to do is try to figure out ways to look at the state budget. It's a complex item, I haven't seen it yet, but I'd like to do what I can to look at it and see if there's ways we can redirect funds from special interests to the education budget. And there's a couple of congressmen and senators who tried to pass some bills last time, they didn't work, to help include funding for education. I like to work with all the other issues, such as the clean air issues, the environment. The federal lands issue is a very big issue, and hopefully we can get to that question later.
I believe there are some questions on some of those topics. We'll pose the same question to Mr. Webb. What would be your legislative priorities for the coming session?
Interestingly, because you get this question a lot, it's really a question, do you have an agenda of your own? And frankly, I think that if legislators have an agenda of their own, then they focus on that agenda and not your agenda. As far as the issues that Jeff brings up, those are valid issues. They're worth having a discussion about. Education funding is a top priority for the legislature in general. How to fund it, where the money should come from, public lands, all of those things factor in. Do we spend enough on education in this state? We do not. Do we have the money to spend more on education without sacrificing from somewhere else where the need is? That's a balance that we have to strike every single session. This is not an easy job, and it's easy to criticize it, but we have, as a legislature, been very effective in balancing not just money, but the various interests in the state.
Thank you. 30-second rebuttal for each candidate. We begin with Mr. Turley.
Okay. Well, I understand the complexity of the issues, and I still feel, from my point of view, that this education budget does not get enough attention. My daughter had to go through school, through the resource system, and not getting the resources she needed because there wasn't enough funding. And when she got her IEPs, they would say, we can't give her this service because there's not enough funding. There needs to be more funding so that kids don't fall through the cracks and get left out. You have to find funding somewhere.
Hold time 30 seconds to Mr. Webb.
You have to find funding somewhere. Interesting. Where's that going to come from? When you fund something, money doesn't come out of nowhere. When you fund something, it either comes out of your pocket or it comes out of another program's pocket. That balance is important. Are we willing to pay more for education Some would say yes, many would say no. You have to fit, when you balance that out and do the surveys and talk to your own constituents, what you find out is that people do not want to pay more taxes. Philosophically, yeah, we'd love to spend more, but out of whose pocket does it come?
Thank you. And let's stay with education. We have a question from someone in the room. So this one will go first to Mr. Webb. They want to know, what are your ideas and any proposed actions to increase education funding? So I guess continuing what you were just talking about.
There are two ways.
90 seconds.
There are two things that have increased education funding over time. Prosperity. If you look back at the times when we had money, education got the bulk of it. When you have prosperity, it raises everybody's boat. So what we're doing about prosperity in the state is benefiting everyone. The public lands issue, we don't have only 30%. We have only 30% of the land in the state, where other states have in all of their lands taxed. Those kinds of challenges, plus our family sizes and our amount of income, we're taxing our people as much as our people can really afford to be taxed.
90 seconds.
Okay. Well, funding of education, Aaron Osmond tried to pass a bill last session which had to do with property taxes. He wanted to make it so that right now, from what I understand, when people buy a home, it puts a certain percentage, a certain amount of money on that home at the time they purchase it. But as the value of that house goes up, the value of your contribution to the state to the education system goes down. Because the amount stays the same, but the percentage goes down. And so that needs to change, because if you're going to fund education perpetually as costs go up, but one of your income sources keeps going down as inflation goes up, that's one of the ways that we can help increase education funding. Another way we can increase education funding is on the mining and oil leases that do have, from what I understand, we have the lowest percentage of royalties on that. If we were to raise our royalties on those that we already have, that would increase school funding dramatically. And that's another way. Another thing that we can do is figure out what to do with families with large sizes. Having people contribute more based upon the size of the family, that's something to be talked about and discussed. I don't know exactly what to do about that. But there's so many ways, other than just saying we're doing enough, that can be done.
30-second rebuttal for Mr. Webb, and perhaps if you'll allow me the privilege, there's a question that came in. Would you favor raising the severance tax on oil and gas to fund education? Mr. Turley just mentioned something to that effect. Maybe you could include in your rebuttal what you think on the subject.
In 30 seconds.
We'll give you more time.
Part of the problem is that as I see it, I have fixed income, and especially elderly constituents contact me all the time about how much property taxes are burdened to them. Any little bit of increase, especially, let's say, to large families, would we really increase taxes to those least able to pay it? That is the same for property taxes on the elderly in their homes, or on taxes to those who have more children in the family. So don't believe that works. Oil and tax, right? The severance tax is really a matter of supply and demand. There are other places that they can drill. If we raise the fees, will they drill elsewhere? And then we won't have any field fees at all. They aren't a captive market. There are other oil fields where they can go and explore and spend money.
And you notice we did give you more time on that. I take your point.
That's enough.
So we'll sort of break format here. Let's give 90 seconds on this particular question to Mr. Turley. Are you in favor of raising severance tax on oil and gas to fund education?
I am in favor of it, mainly because the resources which those companies are getting out of the ground are the state of Utah's resources. And when they're making huge profits on those resources at the citizens' expense, I don't agree with that. And raising the royalties equal to what some of the other states are. And like I say, I'm new to this, I'm just trying to figure these things out, but I do know that royalties are a big thing. And what they are right now is in favor of the oil companies and in favor of those that take advantage of those rather than for the citizens of this state, especially for our education system here. That's it.
Thank you, appreciate that. We'll return back to the regular format. The next question, I'll combine a couple of questions here, one from the Herald Journal staff and one that came in from our audience here. So in general, what ideas do you have, actions you would take to ensure health care to the poor? And in specific, if we combine this in, do you support or oppose Governor Herbert's Medicaid expansion plan? Explain your position. And so Mr. Turley is the first response here. 90 seconds.
Okay. I am a big supporter in the Medicaid expansion. There's $700 million of our taxpayer dollars that we've given to the federal government that are not coming back to us. And so by refusing to take those dollars because we're afraid that the federal government's going to control us, it just doesn't make sense. And there's 123,000 people that would benefit from those funds that come in. And I don't get it. It's our money, and I don't know, probably each one of you in this room probably knows somebody who is barely above the poverty line that could benefit from the Medicaid. Rather than being able to participate in those Medicaid expansion, they are spending all their money, they're going to the debt, they're going to have to end up filing bankruptcy. So it's almost, and this doesn't make sense to me. $700 million of taxpayers' money being refused to be given back to us.
Thank you. So 90 seconds, I'll just repeat the question. So in general, ideas, actions to ensure health care to the poor, and in specific, do you support or oppose Governor Herbert's Medicaid expansion plan? Explain your position.
Philosophically, the legislature is concerned that, especially based on recently where there was sequestration and the government shutdown, that you can't trust the government, the federal government, to pay the money. If you get people committed to this and then you have to jerk it out from under them, or you have to try and make that money up out of the people of Utah's pockets, then that's a serious problem. Given though, however, Governor Herbert's plan, which is to negotiate with the federal government to get that money back so that we control it. So we've got the same amount of money, but the state will be determining how it's spent, is a plan that I can support. I don't know the details yet, but in theory, that seems to make sense to me.
And 30-second rebuttal.
From what I understanding, the group that the governor put together to look at this situation is comprised of a bunch of insurance companies and other large corporations. And so from my point of view, the people that are making these decisions and giving advice to the governor are looking at their own best interests and not for those 123,000 people that could benefit from this insurance.
30-second rebuttal opportunity to Mr. Webb.
That's a fairly typical posture for a Democrat to take. It just is that we don't want private industry involved in anything at all. The state of Utah is private industry oriented. Those people know that subject. Are they biased in their opinions? Probably, but they bring an expertise that I think makes a lot of sense in the healthcare field.
Next question, and this one will go first to Mr. Webb. Do you think Utah should continue to push for transfer of federal lands back to state ownership?
You know, when this first came up, I thought it was a pipe dream. I really did. But this has caught fire. All of the United States legislatures are starting to pass resolutions. All of the states had multiple or large amounts of federal land to begin with. They got to have theirs got turned to private and sold. But now we want to be the playground for the Eastern establishment. Are we worried that we can't manage it well? That's crazy to me. The federal, I see a lot of you shaking your heads. Let me say this just as clearly as I can say it. The federal government does virtually nothing well.
90 seconds, same question, I'll just reiterate it to Mr. Turley. Do you think Utah should continue to push for transfer of federal lands back to state ownership?
I do not. And if you look at what's behind that bill, it was developed and created by a group called ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Commission. It's a private, nonprofit organization that they call themselves not a lobbyist group, but they are a lobbyist group, because if you look like a duck, you sound like a duck, if you walk like a duck, you're a duck. So ALEC has extreme control over this legislature, and Mr. Webb is a member of that organization. And they wrote a bill trying to transfer all these lands back for one purpose only, is so that the large oil companies that are members of that group can prosper from that transfer of ownership. They wrote the bill, they gave it to several western states. And Utah and Arizona are the only two states that passed it in the legislature, and Arizona's governor is the first, was smart enough not to pass it. So Utah was the only one that accepted that bill. And what's sad is ALEC is getting the state of Utah, the taxpayers of the state of Utah, to do their battling for them in the courts up to the Supreme Court at taxpayer expense. So I think, yes, I don't think that was a smart thing to do.
30-second rebuttal opportunity to Mr. Webb.
This issue can be painted probably about any way you want to paint it. But I'm surprised that the same people that believe that there needs to be additional funding for education are fighting this very transfer. Look at the education and monies available in North or South Dakota, Missouri, in Wyoming, in Alaska. Look at the amount of money that's available to education. Do you not want that money for education? Is it that you have the same attitude that Harry Reid has, and that's like leave the filthy stuff in the ground? There has to be funding for education, and those who have these kinds of resources for education have what they need.
30 seconds will give you a little extra time to use one for rebuttal.
Okay, I don't know where to answer that at, but, you know, it's federal lands, there can be some negotiations with the federal government. I mean, I don't know, I'm new at this, I'm trying to figure this out, but there's got to be a way to access it. But just selling the land give it to Utah so they can sell to the highest bidder, there's going to be portions of the land that we won't get access to because it'll be private property. I don't know if the state of Utah understands the expense it's going to cost to manage those lands. I remember during the county budget session, they were waffling over how they're going to close the budget for this year for the county, because there was an X amount of dollars that are waiting to come from the federal government because of tax dollars they aren't getting for those federal lands. And so if they depend upon the federal government to give them money for the federal land so they can manage the county, how are they going to pay for that if that's state lands?
Thank you. We're about halfway through the debate, and so I'll just reintroduce everybody. This is a debate presented by the Logan Journal and Public Radio. It is a debate between candidates for the 5th legislative district in the Utah House of Representatives. We have with us the Republican incumbent Curt Webb and his Democratic challenger Jeff Turley. And so we were going through questions provided by the Herald Journal staff and also by you. And I believe the clipboard is going around again. Those who arrived a little bit later, you have opportunity to ask a question by writing down a clipboard. And if we have time, we will certainly get to it. So thank you to our candidates for coming, and thank you to our audience for being here with us. Let's open the second half of the debate with an air quality question. This will go first to Mr. Turley, and it's very simple. How can we improve air quality?
It's a very good question. I just spent the whole day today at the Cass County Air Consortium. It was a group of legislators, mayors, professors, and concerned citizens in the Cass Valley area. It was a wonderful 8 hours. My mind was open to some of the great things that are being done. But there's so much more that we can do. One of the things that that Mr. Red taught me today was the function of the catalytic converter and what it did, what it does, and how important that is for air pollution. And just because of that one device on a car, it can make such a big difference in the air pollution here in this valley. And the reason is because that catalytic converter does not start working until it gets up to 700 degrees. So when you start your car, it's after 2 to 3 miles before that thing gets hot enough to be able to start breaking down those pollutants so that it doesn't pollute the air. So when you start your cars in the morning, that's just straight exhaust coming out without being processed. And if we idle our cars, it's just a lot of people start the car in the morning and let it get warm first. And Mr. Red was talking about don't cold start just start your car and get going where you need to go. So there's lots of things we can do. If we make 10, 11 trips and store it in a week's time, let's do better. Let's make 3 trips and plan it all together, do a little planning. So, I mean, there's so many things we can do. And I could go on forever about that.
All right, we'll give 90 seconds on the same question, Mr. Webb. How can we improve air quality?
We created in the legislature a voluntary caucus of legislators called the Clean Air Caucus. All of the legislators in our valley serve in that caucus. It's a bipartisan caucus. There are a lot of Democrats in there, and what we've done is proposed a number of bills. Some of them passed, some of them didn't last legislative session, and there will be others. We've learned a lot. We've learned that we've made a lot of progress. It may not seem like it when you look at what the air looks like, but if you look at the actual pollutants that are being measured, it is being reduced. The next biggest thing that you will see is the tier 3 fuels and the tier 3 automobiles. What we've learned is that the tier 3 automobiles are available now. All you have to do is ask for it. If you're going to order a new vehicle, say that you want a tier 3 fuel vehicle, it will make a difference all by itself. But when coupled with the tier 3 fuels that will be out and about, they'll be gradually phased in over the next couple of years, those things will make a big difference. If we all could get rid of our old cars and buy new ones, then we'd have our problem solved here, at least nation-wise. That's how far we've come with air pollutants coming out of automobiles. But we can't do that to people, because the people least able to afford a new car are the ones we would be putting that burden on. It's a matter of time, and things will get a lot better. My hat's off to everyone who's pushed this. It is an important issue. It's an important issue here. It's an important issue along the Wasatch Front. We do not downplay it. We consider it extremely important, and I do too.
30-second rebuttal opportunities, Mr. Turley.
Well, things are doing a little better, but just because we're doing better doesn't mean we can just slow down and stop doing that. There's so much we can do. And yes, the legislature did pass some bills, and they're making some progress, and things are getting better. But we need to, as people, do more on our own, such as take less trips, ride our bikes more. Everything that we can do.
Thank you. 30 seconds to Mr. Webb.
I agree. Education is definitely a part.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next up, a question concerning higher education. This one will go first to Mr. Webb. Concerning higher education, can the legislature do more than it has already done, expanding out-of-state tuition waivers and alumni scholarships, to mitigate the impact of the missionary age change?
The impact of missionary age change is about over. Those kids are out, and many of them are already starting to come back. The tuition waivers that we've done, there are about 12 different kinds of tuition waivers, and some of it was to help mitigate the loss of students. If you've got facilities that have a certain capacity, you might as well have them full of students, because it doesn't cost you any more to educate a full class than it does to educate a half a class. Consequently, those tuition waivers have been a valuable tool. They're There are legacy waivers for children of alumni. There are waivers for those that are close to the border. There are waivers for our military people because they deserve them and they've earned them. There are waivers for the disabled or the disadvantaged. There are just a number of waivers that are available, and I think that they have been used effectively. And that if the crux of the question is how are we dealing with the change in enrollment based on the missionary age change, we're about through that cycle.
So 90 seconds next to Mr. Turley. I'll just read the question again. Concerning higher education, can the legislature do more than it's already done, expanding out-of-state tuition waivers and alumni scholarships to mitigate the impact of the missionary age change?
I think Mr. Webb was correct saying that the missionary thing is almost over. From my understanding about those education waivers for out-of-state people, they are working, and to prove that they are working, Utah State University just recently announced they had $220 million in new research dollars. And my understanding is the way higher education is funded with USU and University of Utah is approximately a third of the dollars come from tuition, a third of the dollars come from the legislature, and a third of the dollars come from research. And when we're able to get top-notch students from out of the state and offer them in-state tuition, we're able to get better programs, which brings more research dollars into the university, which benefits everybody.
30 seconds available to you, Mr. Webb, for rebuttal.
It also benefits the state in that many of those students that we get to come in here are talented students. And if that kind of talent will move here and stay here once they graduate, and many of them do, it increases our talent.
30 seconds to Mr. Turley.
And whether we can do more, yes, there's always more you can do. Higher education is important, but the tuition rates are getting higher and higher, and we do have one of the lowest funded tuitions in the area, in the country, but students are still struggling with costs for tuition. So there's got to be ways to help other students be able to go to college.
The clipboard has made its way back around to me, so I believe everybody's had an opportunity to ask a question. And when it went out and around, the person, I think it's probably the same person who wrote this question, circled it. So, so for that person, here's your question. What are your views on repealing polygamy laws in Utah? This one goes first, Mr. Turley.
I haven't thought about, but it has to do with marriage laws. And my beliefs are, I stand by my marriage between a man and a woman, and if it's a man and more women, the laws are saying that's not what it is. It's like, I don't know what to say about that. That one's moving for a loop.
All right. Mr. Webb, repeat the question. What are your views on repealing polygamy laws in Utah?
Amendment 3 to the Utah Constitution, which is getting a lot of attention for a lot of reasons, specifically says that marriage in the state of Utah is between one man and one woman. Now, if you want to change that, in order to change that, the federal government, the Supreme Court would have to overturn that, or it would take a supermajority in the House and the Senate to put it to the people. Then the people would have to change it. I'm not convinced we should go that direction.
30 second rebuttal opportunity, Mr. Turley.
Well, I think things are fine the way they are. I mean, I'm from polygamy background. My great-great-grandfather was polygamous. He had many wives. But right now, in today's society, I happen to agree with Mr. Webb on this one. I don't think it's a good idea.
Mr. Webb, 30 seconds.
None of my ancestors were polygamous.
You're sort of unusual in that respect. Here's the next question. What's that?
You're not supposed to make jokes.
I'll try to do better. The next question is from the clipboard, so therefore from our audience here. They say, in this one, I'll check my notes, goes first to Mr. Webb. They say the Logan City School District is currently at 60% poverty. How would you help their situation?
Wow. You know what's happening? It's really a real estate problem. That is, Utah, or the city of Logan has become landlocked. We've used up all the ground that we've used for development. So what happens is the neighborhoods age, then they end up with young people that live in the rental units for a while, and as soon as, this is actually what Superintendent Garrett said, he said, once they are economically able, they move to the county, because there's no place to build a new home. It would be, if there was a way to make the market trend towards taking these older homes as they turn over and refurbishing them, doing remodeling, get young families to move into these neighborhoods and making them vibrant again, lots of that would change. It's just, we're just in a bad cycle, a bad phase of the cycle in Logan right now.
So I'll restate the question for Mr. Turley, in 90 seconds. The Logan City School District is currently at 60% poverty. How would you help the situation?
First of all, I don't know if 60% poverty has anything to do with real estate. I think it has to do with wages and the jobs that people have. And I don't know if it's because people don't make enough money, we got large families, they're making minimum wage, that they can't, that they're living below the poverty line. So in my opinion, it's not a real estate issue, it is strictly a wage issue for people up in the city.
30-second rebuttal opportunity, Mr. Webb.
Well, obviously, it's not clearly all by itself a real estate issue, but it is a phase issue. Much of the poverty that's reflected in there is our student population and our elderly population, which is what the population is in Logan right now because of the transition.
30 seconds to Mr. Turley.
I just still stick with my thing. I believe it's a wage issue, and then how we bring up the wages for a family to be able to support their family, that's always going to be the case.
Okay. I'll go next to another question from our audience here. And I apologize if I stumbled a bit. I didn't have time to preview this, but I think I get the gist, and you will as well. This one will go first to Mr. Turley. The questioner says, please talk about the impact of the government shutdown and its impact in Utah. We have the 6th largest percentage of federal workers in the nation. Our national parks were shut. 40,000 workers were furloughed. The state spent $1 million of state taxpayer dollars to reopen the parks. Please explain how this is a good thing.
It's not a good thing. That government shutdown, I know some friends of mine who worked at Hill Air Force Base that were shut down, and they're struggling families. And for this federal government to, for political purposes, take their agendas out on the working families of this state, it's not a good thing. They're the ones that are suffering. I don't know exactly, I know that they put $30 million into opening up those parks. And whether we got that money back from the federal government, all of it or some of it, I don't know. But anytime you shut down the government for political purposes, it's strictly the people are the ones that suffer. And they can't pay their rent, they can't put food on the table because their paychecks are furloughed. It's just not a good thing.
So 90 seconds on Mr. Webb. Did you get the gist of that, or should I repeat it?
No, I know this.
Okay.
Nobody liked the government shutdown. Blame it on whoever you want to blame it on. But it was a reality check, wasn't it? That we can't always depend on the federal government to give us what we want. It was also a nice reality check on how responsible a state can be in situations like that. When we voted to put up money of our own to keep those parks open for the people who are visiting, and for those businessmen down there who are suffering as a result. That's the kind of responsibility that you see the state of Utah having. You know, lots of what we'll discuss are federal issues rather than state issues. But let me just say that we don't control very much of what happens on the federal level. But if you take a really good look at the things we control and how Utah handles itself, you'll find that we do things very responsibly, and that Utah is a wonderful place to live, mostly because of the citizens, but kind of government that you have, the kind of representatives you have are part of that positive influence.
30-second rebuttal opportunity for Mr. Turley.
Well, it was strictly a political reason when they shut it down, and like I said, it's the citizens of the state that did hurt from it. And yes, the federal government did it, and we suffered from it. And the state did kick in, which is good that they did.
30 seconds to Mr. Webb. Okay. Let's go to our next question from the clipboard. This one will go first to Mr. Webb. What is the most important action we can take to hold our elected officials accountable?
Is this term limits discussion?
We do have a term limits question. We can combine those two.
Okay, let's combine those two because it's part of the same thing.
Let me just read this one. What about term limits for legislators? Are these wise? Is there any chance they would ever pass?
You have to decide whether you need term limits or not in the state of Utah. House of Representatives, for example. Right now, last time, 21 out of 75 members of the House of Representatives were brand new. After this election cycle, virtually 40 to 50% of everyone in the House of Representatives will have been there 2 years, or 4 years or less, or actually 2 years, or just barely over 2 years. The people have an opportunity, especially like right now. It's really hard to run for re-election every 2 years. We have to face our constituents and account for the times that and the things that we've done and the time that we've spent. And if you don't want to keep us, you won't. It's that simple. On the other hand, should you be able to keep the people that you like, even if they've been there a while, you be the judge of that. But I think most of you would say, I like my legislator, and I don't want to be forced to get rid of them.
So 90 seconds to Mr. Turley. I'll just reiterate the questions. What is the most important action we can take to hold our elected officials accountable? And what about term limits for legislators? Are these wise? Is there any chance they would ever pass?
Well, the most important way that we can hold our legislators accountable is to vote them out. If you don't like what they're doing, vote them out. I hear so many times that from so many people that we need to get rid of all of them and start fresh. But when it comes to election time, I don't know whether 80 or 90% of them keep getting elected back in. So as far as term limits are concerned, I support that because when legislators are in there for a long period of time, then it gets to the point where they're entitled to be there. And they're expected to be there, they don't have to worry about competition, and they get comfortable. And when people are comfortable in there, then the special interest groups have more influence on them. And I believe that if you had term limits, maybe 6 years for U.S. House of Representatives, and maybe 8 years for a senator, I think that it would give fresh blood to the problems that we're facing. It would allow more people the opportunity and the privilege to serve their constituents in the community with which they live.
Thank you. 30-second rebuttal opportunity for Mr. Webb.
I assume that Mr. Turley was referring to the Utah House and the Utah Senate for those terms. You know, there's really a lot to be said for institutional knowledge. The learning curve is really steep at the legislature. And it turns over plenty by itself, believe me, it does. And we get some wonderful new legislators in every time. But it's hard to learn. And so to have some stability by having some people that have been there longer than just a few years is actually beneficial to the state.
30 seconds, Mr. Turley.
Now, I admit, I don't know much, but I'm willing to sacrifice everything that I have, that if you elect me in, that I would go through whatever I have to learn. It's not going to be an easy task. I agree with Ms. Webb on that. It's tough, very complicated, but I'm willing to do what I have to do that. And I think that new blood every once in a while is good.
Well, we have reached the time when we should move to closing statements. We've got to many of your questions, and more than I thought we would. So we thank our candidates for adhering to time posts. And we, before we go to closing statements, we thank our candidates. Appreciate them coming. Very important to get to know you and get to know your views on the issues. Thank you to everyone for coming. According to our predetermined order, Mr. Webb will go first once again. Closing statements, 3 minutes, and then Mr. Turley.
Are you sure, Tom? I thought that it was the other way around. If I went first, I would go last on opening and closing.
No, we keep the same order so that the person who went first has that privilege, and then the person who goes last is the other person.
And as he gets the last word both times?
He gets the last word in the entire debate. You got the opening word.
Never mind. It's just an unusual format to do it that way. Thank you. This is, you know, in an age where we say that there's a lot of voter apathy and constituent apathy, I look out and see that there are all of you here who care enough to be here. And hopefully there are people listening on the radio that care too. I appreciate that. You know, when we had the redistricting committee selected, and that's a very large responsibility, they asked the BYU professor to analyze who had been chosen. And he said, you know, none of these people are high profile. They're mostly people who quietly get the work done. And I'd like to think, frankly, that that's the category that I am in. That's the way to get things done in the legislature is that way. The way to understand what the people need is to be among them, to visit the classes. I've had so much fun visiting the classes. We'll have a topic and try to create a bill, and the kids will get to vote, and it's just been exciting. And then they'll come down to the legislature and they'll sit and we'll take time out and come down and try to tell them what's going on and answer their questions. It's a thrill. And then on those Saturday mornings where we sit down and face the public and you get to ask us questions about what's going on in the legislature, you'd be surprised how much those things can change our minds and actually formulate some of the policy that we make at the state level. This is public input. If there is something that I feel strongly about, it's that you have a chance to speak. I've tried to make it so that there was a communication line always open. I've tried to always answer your questions, not avoid anything. I'm sure I've messed up sometimes or disagreed with some of you or forgot to return a phone call or an email. I'm sorry, that was not my intent. So thank you for your input. I really would. I believe that the time that I'm spending now is particularly effective, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. 3 minutes to Mr. Turley.
First of all, I would like to thank again the Herald Journal, the Logan Library, and KUSU for sponsoring this event and recording it and making it available to everybody to hear. I'd like to thank all those who have attended. Thank you for your time and your willingness to hear the candidates speak so you can make some decisions on your own. I'd like to thank Donna McAleer again for being here. I'm just a typical guy who wants to make a difference. I spent the last many years of my life taking care of my wife, and after she passed away, I've got all this time on my hands. And I'm willing to now sacrifice that time for you. I would like to have the opportunity to serve you, to go through the learning curve, to be able to learn about the issues, and be able to talk with you, to be able to represent everybody, and try to make a difference. And I ask that you give me that opportunity. There's so many things I could say right now about what I don't like about what's going on in the state government, that I choose not to talk about that right now because I just want to have an opportunity. I think it's time that Mr. Webb, we give him a thank you for the years of service that he has done, and give somebody else another opportunity to see what they can do to represent the constituents in this community. I will do everything I can. I will listen, and if I don't represent you the way that you'd like me to, then you need to vote me out. So I ask for your vote. I think it would be a privilege and an honor to do that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you join me in giving a round of applause?